Okay, Steve Cooper, and welcome to another Rank Success podcast. And this one is on the theme of CPD, continuous professional or personal development. And the reason I've kind of decided to do this one today is I was monitoring and taking part in the WECOPS College of Policing chat or discussion, which happens on Wednesdays under the hashtag WECOPS. And it was all about CPD and the discussions around what it is, what it isn't, whether people get time for it, whether it should be mandated. So there's some really good questions there, and it just kind of raised some thoughts and some insights for me to just perhaps share with you for those that you want to listen. I have done a previous podcast around this called Taking Responsibility for Your CPD, and the College of Policing define CPD as a range of learning activities through which you can maintain or enhance your capacity to practice legally, safely, ethically and effectively. So quite a broad-ranging definition there. So I think it's important to kind of now, from the policing perspective, what the head lay out as CPD. But as I've alluded to in blogs, etc. before, and I think I shared it last night on the Twitter account, I prefer the Institute of Civil Engineers definition because for me it's a more holistic view and it's more relevant as you kind of progress through the ranks. So predominantly my podcast is around supporting police officers who are going for promotion to Sergeant Inspector and Chief Inspector ranks. And so unsurprisingly it's geared at level 2 of the CVF. So I just want to kind of highlight that level 1 applies to officers developing themselves professionally using the competency and values framework, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But the Institute of Civil Engineers definition of CPD is that they call it the systematic maintenance, improvement and broadening of knowledge and skills and the development of personal qualities necessary for the execution of professional and technical duties throughout your working life. So I quite like that one because it's more impactful, it's more holistic, it covers your career development, and the theme around that is that it's constant. It's why they call it continuous professional development. So it doesn't mean to say you have to be doing it all the time, but when you look back through your career, when you look back through previous postings, what is it that you actually did? What activity did you engage in? And what learning did you take from that helps you learn and grow and develop as an individual, as a professional police officer? And what would you kind of, looking back on that, what would you advise or provide guidance or tips or support to other people? So how will you share that learning? So just some thoughts then, just off the back of that WECOPS chat last night around the topic, the subject, the nature of CPD, continuous professional development. And it was clear for me that there's quite a lot of CPD that does occur in policing, and when you're looking at accredited training, accredited CPD, certainly around operational training. So what I mean by that is senior investigating officers are accredited, so PIP 3, PIP 4, and they have to maintain that accreditation through professional development activity and through recording their training and their time spent developing themselves. And same with firearms, same with public order. You have to have accreditation, you have to have requalifications. So unsurprisingly, there is a record there that exists of that, because without that record you won't get the accreditation, the certification, the maintenance of that learning that enables you to practice. So more in line with the College of Policing's definition of CPD. And I think it's fair to say as well from the CPD, from the WECOPS discussion, that there's a lot of CPD going on in policing. It was just very useful for me, having left the service in 2014, but engaged in CPD activities, so coaching, mentoring, officers through one-to-one sessions or through downloadable guides and through free products and through free services, if you like this podcast, the blogs that I share, and the YouTube channel that I have, just to share some thoughts, some tips, some guidance for officers who do want to maintain their CPD. So for me, it's very much around being on a roll, in the same way as if I don't know how to, I don't know, wire a plug or something, or sort my fishing gear out properly, I can just go on YouTube. And that's what very much I wanted to be able to do for people who aspire, certainly for promotion, but at a broader level, CPD activities. I wanted people just to be able to go on YouTube and go on Rank Success YouTube and say, right, I don't know anything about promotion, but I am aspiring to promotion. It's part of my CPD journey, so I want to progress my career, not just laterally, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but vertically. I want to go through the ranks, or I certainly want to make a step in that direction. So for me, it's very much around providing a body of resources, as I've alluded to, the blogs, the YouTube channel, the podcasts, where people can start getting with it. They can start developing their thinking. I can start provoking, challenging and supporting your thinking around the topic of CPD, and if promotion is your choice, then through promotion. So there's a couple of quotes. I love quotes. They kind of inspire me. They keep me on track. They kind of generate different thoughts, and I go off down different tacks. But one of my favourite quotes is about because CPD is essentially around developing and realising your own personal and professional potential. So one of the quotes I quite like around that is by Sir John Whitmore, who's written really good kind of coaching books, and his quote is, few travel far enough along the road of personal development to realise their full potential. And I love that quote, and the reason I love that quote is because it's absolutely true. Absolutely slam dunk, that one. In my experience, working with people who want to develop along the promotion path for CPD, few of them have travelled far enough along the road of their personal development. It's still a journey that's ongoing to realise their potential. So for me, that's very much around discussing the gaps, discussing what the challenge is ahead, discussing what the process is, discussing where they are with their CPD to date. So what have they learned and how they're going to share that, how they're going to lead teams going into the future, how they're going to cope with change. So we talk through those things, and through that help them realise their potential in the contrived situation, if you like, of a promotion interview or selection assessment centre or interview panel. So quotes are really good for me. There's another quote which I think I shared last night on the WeCops channel. Development, so this is a quote by Peter Drucker, a world famous management guru. Development is always self-development. Nothing could be more absurd than for an organisation to assume responsibility for the development of an individual. The responsibility rests with the individual's abilities and efforts. So I think I posed the question last night, is that still true? Does that still stand? And I think what he's getting at there is that, there are always people who are developing themselves. And there are always people who are ambitious, always people who understand, if you like, the rules of the game, the rules of life, which is that we all learn and grow and develop in our own ways. But what he's saying is, for you to rely upon an organisation to do it, or an enterprise as he calls it, to assume the responsibility for that, that's perhaps a mistaken view, and that this personal drive and ambition or need for learning, thirst for learning, is also present. So I agree with that as well. That these are nice quotes, and they're very good to kind of pose discussion points like this. But I think as with all things, everything's black and white. It's a little bit grayer around that. So yes, definitely, if you want to progress CPD through promotion, then yeah, absolutely, it's got to be a mix and match. You can't rely upon the organisation. So even though the College of Policing said in the leadership review, so their number one recommendation was that it will be expected, or it's expected that every leader takes responsibility for driving their own learning and development. So you're never going to get a clearer indication of the fact that the organisation expects you to drive that, as Drucker alludes to in that quote there. However, there is some great support that is offered by the organisation. So your force may be able to give you specific and bespoke CPD training if you ask for it, and I understand it's not always available all the time for all people, so sometimes you have to go through PDR cycles. You have to say, okay, not this year, maybe next year, or not this month, next month. And I appreciate all the pressures, but this is around a continuous theme of learning and development. So I think there are lots and lots of things out there for people who do want to get on. So there are Churchill scholarships where you can get funding from external organisations to go to America and study a topic of your choice and come back and share that learning with policing for the good of policing. There are bursaries that are awarded by the College of Policing. Some forces are sponsoring through CPD. Some officers who want to do it, who have asked to do it, and the money's available through master's degrees. So, you know, I think organisations will meet you halfway, and sometimes you have to ask for funding, as I've done previously in my career. You don't always get it all at once, so you have to kind of show your commitment to attend a part of a course or a learning programme, and then they'll top it up afterwards as you go through. Lots of different things. It's a mix and match, but generally for me, you know, the competency and values framework alludes in lots of ways to your responsibility to develop yourself. And we're talking here in the context of policing as a professional police officer, but also more broadly, more widely for, you know, those that don't just come to work and live and breathe work. There's a lot of development, both personally and professionally, that goes on outside of policing. You know, some people come to work to earn money, to go and do stuff they love, and to invest in their passion outside of policing. So I accept, you know, we're never going to get all this done in one little podcast or through perhaps one online chat, but it is a chat that you should be having if you want to progress your career either laterally or vertically, with line managers, with senior leaders, so that they are aware of the fact that, you know, you want to do that, because if they don't know, then they can't align you to learning activities. And learning activities do vary. I mean, to be fair, you can spend thousands and thousands of pounds on learning programs, and they're not what you expected them to be, and that's a polite way of saying they're rubbish, and you're disappointed. So again, back to my learning resources and support. It's free. So, you know, blogs and YouTube videos are all about, you know, supporting, challenging, and respectfully provoking your thinking. And I hope that, you know, if I do that well enough through those products and free resources, that you will want to go and take a proper step, an informed decision to perhaps invest a little bit further and download a digital toolkit, hit the ground running, and really kind of move forward with premium products. It is, spookily enough, it is Black Friday this week, so Black Friday deals are all around, and, you know, unsurprisingly, I've got a Black Friday deal on as well. So that is everything I've ever done, and it's on the front page of my site, ranksuccess.co.uk. So if you want to kind of download a digital toolkit, a 4-hour video masterclass of me suited, booted, with my serious head on, talking about promotion issues and CPD, and together with a 90-minute coaching session, then go along to my site, have a look at that. There are only kind of 10 of each, so there's 10 sergeant packages, there's 10 inspector to chief inspector packages. When they're gone, because there's only so much of me, and but I'm more than happy to put that deal out for people. So yeah, in terms of CPD, that's another kind of learning resource that you can avail yourself of now that you're aware of it. And for some people, you know, CPD is more of a priority than for others. So that depends, you know, if you're going for promotion, then, you know, unsurprisingly, you've got to kind of be able to give some evidence, some meaningful evidence, and some examples around where you've helped other people learn and grow and develop, showing responsibility for how you're developing yourself. So that killer question that I allude to on promotion boards, or for promotion boards. And I think on the week ops debate last night, the superintendent actually said he actually had this question on his board. I know it is asked on boards and different variations of it. But essentially, it's, you know, what have you done to develop yourself or anyone else in the last 12 months? And I call that the killer question because it links all these issues together, certainly for those that are kind of looking to progress their careers through promotion and to reflect their own CPD to that point. What have you done to develop yourself? Well, it's taken for granted that you're actually doing this now, so that you have been doing it, that you are doing it. So yes, tell them what you're doing, tell a board what you're doing in relation to that. Look to develop myself, I've done A, B, C, D and E. But make no bones about it, developing other people is what leadership's all about. So how are you actively supporting and developing other people? So again, there's a whole issue around that in terms of, that's a killer question. But essentially, if you can't respond to that in a meaningful way and use your 5, 6, 7 minutes to talk proactively on the front foot about something like that, then effectively you're just reflecting to the board or letting them know that not this time perhaps, because you're not really understanding where it's coming from. You're not really understanding where the question's coming from. And it links very much to that number 1 recommendation in the review of policing, the College of Policing's review, and the expectation that you will, as an aspiring leader, be driving your own development, and more importantly, putting yourself forward as a team leader or a leader of teams, that you understand the expectation on you to take responsibility for other people's CPD and to help them learn and grow and develop in the job. And as I always say, it's not just about that, it's also about helping them to achieve their dreams and their hopes and their aspirations in the job as well, if you can. So all those that want to become, you know, investigators, dog handlers, firearms officers, SIOs in due course, you as a sergeant, inspector, or as a colleague or a peer are a part of that journey through supporting them through discussions, signposting, directing them to resources, and just having supportive conversations with them. Okay, I did say I'll talk about the CVF because essentially the competency and values framework is what governs, if you like, assessment around policing at the moment. So that is the current framework of values and competencies. So there are 6 competencies, there are 4 values, and there's 1 level. Now I always say 1 level, and people say, no Steve, there's actually 3 levels in the CVF, and I go, yeah, I know that, but you're only going to get assessed generally, certainly for promotion at 1 level, generally speaking. There are some exceptions. So for executive positions, and by that I mean superintendent and above, it's level 3, and also for fast track you're assessed on your potential at level 3, and then coming back, you know, sergeants, inspectors and chief inspectors are assessed at level 2 of the competency and values framework, and that is where you can find the guidance, if you like, to help support you and align with your CPD, if you like. So you know, if you look at level 1 and of the CVF, so some sergeants are assessed at level 1, but certainly level 1 is what policing is all about. So constable and practitioner level 1 is what they talk about. So if we just try and link the concept of PDR to we take ownership, for example, which is one of the competencies, if you look at the descriptors on there, and there's 5 for we take ownership at level 1, at the bottom you'll find something that says I actively encourage and support learning within my teams and colleagues. So it's expected that you're actually aware of and alive to your responsibility to not only learn yourself, but to also encourage and to support learning within your teams, so amongst peers and colleagues. And I know all this stuff does go on, it's just that when you come to the CVF, it actually lays it out and spells it out for you. So if you are someone who's going for a lateral CPD development and for a post that you want, you understand this. It's just as important to understand it at level 1 as it is to understand it at level 2 or 3. So if you're going for lateral promotion and they are advertising a vacancy for a job you really want, and you know it's a competitive interview or process to get that post, because there's generally only a few left or a few available, it's important for you to kind of familiarise yourself with the CVF as part of your PDR, your professional development, if you like, and to understand that clearly in those descriptors you will find the link to what's expected of you. So very much around lateral promotion, CVF applies to that as well. It also applies to recruitment for people coming in. But in terms of you understanding the levels, for PDR, most of the time this is talking to you as a constable, as a practitioner at level 1, but as a supervisor up to chief inspector at level 2. So you will find that in the CVF guidance on the College of Policing's website, and have a look at those descriptors because they're really important. One of the other competencies at level 2, we're emotionally aware. I encourage reflective practice. So again, reflective practice, looking back on what you learned, what went well, what didn't go well, what would you do differently next time. That's PDR as well. So just reflecting on where you are at the moment, where you want to be, and the steps that you might want to kind of take to get there. So when we're talking about CPD, often when I'm doing masterclasses, I will ask for a show of hands, who's actually got a CPD plan at the moment. And for those that are, I try and always encourage or enable a supportive environment there. So I'm aware that not everybody wants to raise their hands, and not everybody has to. But for those that do, I'll say thanks very much for that. Could you just share with us what that is? What is that? What is your CPD plan? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What is it? And then we get to the crunch of it, that actually it's not really anything other than a discussion that people have had, and that's okay. But having some kind of plan, having some kind of record of what you've done is helpful, not only for you to reflect on, as I just alluded to, but it's also a good idea for you to kind of look at where you are now and where you want to be and how you're getting there. So we're talking about goal setting there towards things perhaps 2 years down the line. If you want to develop yourself to be a detective or for promotion, or as a supervisor, or a particular post that you want, having a CPD plan can be really helpful and meaningful, and help you progress to where you want to be. So if I was looking at a couple of tips around that for CPD, because people say, well, why do I need to write stuff down? And you don't. But if you're preparing for an interview, or you're looking to kind of show that you're actually professional, that you're learning, and sometimes a position or a post asks for evidence of it, it's much easier to go back to your plan and go, yeah, I remember that job. Oh, I made a mistake there, and I wouldn't do that again. So let's share the learning with the panel, or let's include what I learned from that experience in my application, or I'm happy to talk to a panel about that. It's just a great reminder as well. So some tips then, just quickly, some tips for getting a CPD plan in place. A gap assessment, what gaps have you got at the moment? What would you like to work on? What do you need to work on? So compare where you are now against where you want to be. Identify your goals, because if they're not clear, then you're just meandering, you're not heading towards them, somewhere where you want to travel to. Are they, specific career goals? Or they could be personal goals as well. What steps are needed to reach them? Write it down, make it tangible. Gather as much information around that as you possibly can. Do you want to develop laterally, or for promotion, or for both? So another point would be, evaluate your professional skills. What are they? So a lot of people say, well, actually, I'm okay doing my job at the moment. I'm professional. I do my job. Okay, so what is it then? What are your professional skills? What are they? What skills do you need to acquire or improve to move forward while you're learning and growing and developing? Decide on a strategy. What's your plan to get there? Have you got a plan? Who can help? There's lots of people in policing, colleagues, friends, peers, supervisors, managers, who are happy to help. And if they see you're committed, then they're more than happy to help and invest in doing that. And the last thing really is just to adopt a timeline view. Where do you want to be in 1 year, or 3 years, or 5 years? What does that development journey look like? What needs to have happened for you to get there? So again, just taking that timeline view of 12 months, 3 years and 5 years, where do you want to be in that time? Because it gives you some focus for the future. That's about vision. That's about direction of travelling, your goals on the way. And having a plan is better than not having a plan. As I said, you're probably meandering if you haven't got a plan. So with CPD then, attitude and effort are two things that you can control with your CPD. So if your attitude to CPD is a bit laissez-faire, well, it won't get you there. And I know it's a bit of a kind of, did you really just say that, Steve? But laissez-faire won't get you there. You've actually got to be driven, you've actually got to be focused, you've actually got to inject a bit of your activity and your life force into CPD if you want to get to somewhere else. Now, just on that point very quickly, I can remember a time when in our PDRs, which is where ultimately in your performance development review, if it's a meaningful process that works and it's valued by people who are involved in it, generally PDRs are a great way of capturing CPD and justifying and evidencing why you should be considered for that post that everybody wants to go for. But I do accept, I'm a realist, you know, they don't always, they do vary a lot, PDRs, and that's why you have to have standalone selection processes. But in terms of CPD and PDRs, I do remember a time where, you know, you used to be able to tick at the bottom of the box, no, I don't want to take part in PDR this year, I don't want a professional review of my work this year. And I think you could do that in the force I was in at one stage for 1 year. So you could effectively have a carryover. So when you're talking about the pressures on you in the role, and I think that arose in the WeCops debate last night, is it stressful to have to do CPD? And I think they also raised the issue of mandating, the question for discussion around mandating CPD in your own time. For me, I kind of shrieked like a scolded cat away from that, because, you know, having worked stressful, long, busy shifts, and you've only got to look at the zeitgeist of policing at the moment to know that that's what most people are experiencing. The last thing you want to do when you come home, or the last thing that might be a priority for you, is your CPD. Now, certainly for a professional CPD as a police officer, but, you know, if you've got a passion outside, so whether it's canoeing, whether it's being a scout leader, whether it's a football coach, then guess what? You're going to be energised when you come in after that long shift and go out and do that because it's passionate. So what we're talking about is understanding the difference between personal and professional development when we talk about CPD, and it's very much, I think, should be kind of shifted over to, you know, professional development. Personal's in with it, but professional development is what we're talking about here, and progressing your career as you want to do it. But in terms of that ticking the box and having a carryover, I think it might be okay for 1 year. So if your supervisor has a discussion, you say, do you know what, this individual's performing clearly to the best of their ability with all the pressures and strains that are ongoing at the moment. I have no concerns, that's fine. But I don't think you'd be allowed to tick that box every year, because there is a responsibility and there are expectations around the professionalism of individuals. And so there should be with that an expectation that that individual is investing some of their drive and energy and life force, if you like, to become better, even if that's just reviewing and reflecting on what they're doing, so that they can do things slightly differently and better as they move forward. Okay, so just to be aware, some of those questions, whether you're going for lateral promotion, CPD, or for vertical promotion, the CVF is the kind of tool with which you can align, you know where the questions are coming from. So in terms of CPD, you know, deliver, support and inspire, let's just pull that one out the air. As a sergeant or as an aspiring constable aiming for sergeant, how will you manage the performance of your team? Well, funny enough, CPD is a part of that. How will you measure that you're having a positive impact? Well, again, that's around one-to-ones, that's around your relationship with your team members, that's around the responsibility that you take for developing them as individuals, giving them opportunities to learn and to grow and to develop, giving them protected learning time, if such a thing exists, before, you know, I get shouted down. But just being part of their journey, and they can look back on that then and go, do you know what, I had a really supportive supervisor who really cared about me, and I know it was difficult for them at the time, but they did try and help me move forward to where I want to be now. So for me, speaking for me personally, I can look back on a number of individuals through my policing career who really looked out for me, really met my energy and drive and determination, and helped me get some of the opportunities. So for CPD, progressing as a coach, a level 7 qualification coach, I had to apply for the funding, yes. I had to put the work in for months and months, yes. I had a degree that was funded by the force as well. It's there if you want it. It might not be, you might need to keep going back and asking for it, but generally I've always found that there are really supportive people, and there are some great supervisors or some great leaders and managers out there. And conversely, the obvious is true, there are people who don't invest as much as you'd like them to, and perhaps don't give as much guidance and support and advice as they could do, but that's life, that's in all areas of life. And so in terms of CPD, that's why I think it comes back to you having to drive it and cope with some of the frustrations there, but also some of the breakthrough moments, some of those moments of joy, and some of those moments where you really learn something, aha moments, light bulb moments, and you look back and go, wow, that was the right choice for me. I aspired to this activity, to this post, to this position, and actually I'm now getting back some of what I put in to get there. So okay, we've covered quite a bit there, and I know it's just a short podcast really. Lots of cops, many officers are engaged in professional development activity. Of course they are, but they don't automatically think of it as CPD, and that's understandable as well, because the pace of life today, certainly as response officers, I've got friends and family and relatives, some of whom are doing degrees as part of being in the police, and are finding it as officers learning and completing their probationary periods hard, together with family responsibilities, together with working shifts, together with having a life outside. It is hard. So that's CPD, that's, if you like, mandatory. It's part of becoming a cop. And whatever the wider, broader arguments around that, that's fine. But coming back to the point, really, many officers are engaged in professional development activity and personal development activity, but might not always think about it in those terms. And that's okay. It's just making the point that actually cops are doing it. And for me, ideally, in an ideal world, it should be kind of captured within a meaningful PDR process. But the reality is that even with the best intentions, the values of PDRs across forces really does vary. So, as I alluded to earlier on, attitude and effort are two things you can control and bring to bear on your CPD if you want to. Just a final kind of reminder, I will be back with other podcasts, but just as a final reminder, I do offer digital downloadable toolkits, a YouTube channel, as I alluded to, podcasts like this, and blogs. There are now lots and lots and lots of them, so if you wanted to immerse yourself for free in some CPD, not all of it is for promotion, although essentially and primarily it is. You will develop your awareness and raise your awareness around lots of issues by having a read through some of those free blogs, listening to some of my podcasts, if you're going for interviews for positions at level 1 of the CVF as practitioners. But any of it's there at any time for you to kind of link into and align your personal drive to, and hopefully it will support your CPD. I'm always interested in feedback, so if you want to leave some on my YouTube channel, or on my Twitter channel, or my Facebook, please do, and I will be back with another podcast on another topic shortly, and until then, take care, thanks for listening, stay safe.